Hi, I'm Adam Meyer of Mill City Lutherie in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in this video, we've got this 5-string Spectre Euro bass in. It is in need of a new jack. So I do such long-winded repair diaries. I'm like, well, let's do a simple one. Let's do a jack replacement. This is active electronics, so it's going to require a stereo barrel jack. In a moment, I'll be going over the differences between mono and stereo, the regular 1/4-inch output jack, barrel jack, the hookup wires, how to make sure that it's all done properly, and the reasons why these certain parts are used in certain instances. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get this underway. All right, these are the common 1/4-inch output jacks, the mono and stereo. I'm just going to be discussing these. There are some other variations. There's these switching style jacks. Got these from Graphtech, and I'm not sure where this one came from. These are for, like, very unique situations. There's a little tab that gets disconnected when this is plugged in. I'm not going to be going over these because most likely you're not looking for information on these. So, so the common mono and stereo jack. Now this just has a hot and ground, that's mono. There's only one hot or one signal to it. And that comes to here. That's the tip or the arm of the jack, and it connects to the tip of your plug. See, as you plug it in, it's making that connection. If you ever unplug your cable from your guitar, you notice that you touch here, you get it. That's the active hot signal. So that will be the hot connection, and the easy way to follow which tab that gets soldered to, or which tab this goes to, you just simply follow it down. You notice here that it goes to a ring. There's a few layers here, little brown kind of washers, and you just follow where that is. That piece of metal comes around to this tab. This is the hot. So you would solder your hot wire to this connection, which connects to the tip of the jack. Another way of going about it is the cylinder, this main body, the ground here. This tab is connected to that. See that here? So the ground wire gets connected to this one. Now when we go to our stereo jack, you notice when I plug in, the tip goes all the way to this connection, and the side of the jack comes to this connection, the ground of your cable. This is ground, this is hot. Plug that in all the way. This is the hot. You do the same thing. Follow that down, and you just follow this little ring until you find the tab that is part of it. It's right there. This comes down here. It's the bottom one. Comes around to that. So that is your hot. Now this is the ground for the battery. When you disengage, you're going to disconnect the battery. That's the idea. That's why we use this in active electronics. So I'm going to plug that in again. It's connecting to the shaft or ground of the plug. So we're going to follow that, and it's this ring. We'll come around this way. It goes behind there. It comes to this tab. So this is going to be for the battery. Follow that around. Goes behind there. There's your arm. So that is the battery ground. Then once again, your main chassis ground, which is the cylinder of this, the wire that's going to connect to the back of the pots, the wire that gets pressed underneath the bridge, the cylinder that's connecting to this one here in the center. So you just, an easy way, so you know, you got your hot, just follow where that goes, find that tab, your battery ground, just follow that down, which tab does that go to, and the cylinder, that's the main ground, that's this tab right here. Okay, so let's say your jack has come loose and a wire is broken off and you can't figure out what goes where. If you have two separate wires, one wire, the other end should be soldered to the back of a pot, that will be ground. One wire will be to the tab on a pot, that would be hot. That's a real simple explanation on that. Every now and then your jack comes loose and you look inside and there's just one wire dangling on, like that, and you're like, well, what's going on there? What's happening? Well, this here is just a little sample. A lot of times these wires are gray, they can be red. The color doesn't matter. This is rubber insulation, and if you're to strip it back, you'll find a bunch of frayed silver wire like that. That's going to be the ground. Here, I'll show you what I mean by stripping it back. Take a wire stripper, pull it back like that, and you just have to kind of pull it all to the side, and you'll find a white wire in the middle. Come back to this side just because it's easier to show. So the white wire, that's hot. That's either going to your volume, or depending how things are wired up, it's going to the tone. It'll be on one of the little tabs. This other end will be soldered to the back of the pot. So you strand these together, and it would be soldered like this, like I was showing you on the jack. Hot there, ground there. If your jack comes loose, maybe it doesn't have a lock washer on it, add a lock washer so it's tightened down. But if it comes loose, it's real easy for one of these to get yanked off, and then you end up with no sound. So if you only see the one wire coming out of there, strip it back, strand the wires together, tin them, and now you know how to put it together. There's the older version. This is what's still used by Gibson and many other companies now, but this is the same idea. It's called single conductor wire. Single conductor wire. You only count the number of signal wires you have. This is one. This is going to be one. If you're wondering, this happened to come loose, or you're not sure how to solder it up, this braided wire outside, that is ground, you can simply just push it back, and you'll find most commonly a black wire inside. It's fabric. It's the same deal on this. You just push it back. There's a little bit of wire inside there. That's your hot signal. Now you might be asking, why are you doing a wire inside of a different wire? Having your hot or signal wires inside this braid, or the frayed wire inside here, that ground helps insulate and isolate your signal wire here, the hot. It's just kind of the same idea as if you put copper foil shielding inside of your pickup cavities. It helps protect the signal from outside interference. So this is kind of the old school. If you're doing something like this, many times there will be shrink tubing added onto the outside. I normally do that because if things jiggle around, this can touch something that's not supposed to, and you ground out your sound. So this is, more commonly used like import Asian-made guitars and stuff, but they do the same job. One doesn't sound better than the other, but that's just their common use. Strip it back, you'll find the hot and the ground, and there you go. Okay, so now we're going to jump to getting the jack actually put back into the guitar. So let's just say you have this all soldered up. Whether you're watching this video to learn how to solder it, or if it just simply came loose, it's the same idea. You want to have a lock washer on your jack. It's one of these right here. If you can see that, on the inside there's these little teeth. What happens is when this gets tightened down on the jack, those little teeth will create pressure, which helps keep the jack from coming loose. There's pressure added on the threading here because you're compressing this washer down, the little teeth on it. So the idea is you want to have a lock washer, put it on your jack. If it is missing, you can find these at your local hardware store. There's nothing special about them. Sometimes they're called star washers, or I believe I've seen them called toothed washers, teeth washers. But the idea is that you want to have these little teeth on the inside. You want it to fit as close as you can to the same diameter of the barrel of the jack. And this goes on the inside of your jack plate, or if this mounts to the side of the guitar, or whatever style that we're doing here. I'm just using a Les Paul jack plate as an example. That goes inside. The jack is next. Regular flat washer, nothing special about that. Then you have your nut. So we've got all these on in order. If sometimes you might have an extra nut on the inside if the jack is long, and that way you can adjust how much of the jack sticks out the outside of the jack plate, but usually it's not needed. So just try and make sure you get that lock washer on there. If you can't fit the lock washer on because you have a nut on the inside, take that nut off, find a lock washer. That's more important. So now we're going to tighten this down. If possible, make sure that you hold the jack and then tighten the nut with a wrench. Do not mount this all to the guitar and then only try to tighten the nut. This can still turn on the inside and then you'll pull the wires off, especially if you don't have a lock washer. So if you're watching this, you came across this video and you just noticed that your jack is loose, take the 4 screws out of this jack plate, or if there's 2, like a football shape one or a jack plate or a Strat jack plate, whatever style, you want to take that off the guitar, check if you have a lock washer, hold the jack in place, tighten the nut, then put it back on the guitar. All right, one final note about if you can't get your hand inside to hold the jack while you're trying to tighten it, there are tools available. The idea, I don't remember where I got this, I've had it for many years, but the idea is there's a little Allen screw down inside there, and as you turn that screw, these little parts here, they will span out and tighten to the jack. Now the jack is snug. So imagine you've fed this through the guitar, it's in the hole on the side of the guitar, but you need to tighten the nut, jack's wanting to move around, you put your jack holder in there, and now you can tighten it into place. So, all right, here's the replacement jack. I always recommend going with Switchcraft. There might be a couple other good brands, but some of the ones that are, if you're shopping around, you see something that's a few dollars cheaper than Switchcraft, just don't bother. Get one of these, just make sure it lasts really, really well. We have this really long tab here, which this is actually intended for when these are used in acoustic guitars or something like that, where this will clamp around the cable coming to the jack to help keep it from getting yanked on the connections. But this is actually to ground. We won't need all this length that won't fit into the bass. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it down the same length as the other ones. There's a few ways of doing this. You can just wire cutter, wiggle it back and forth with pliers, and it'll just come right off. Clip that sharp edge off there, and there you go. Now we have 2 other terminals. It's a stereo jack because you can wire it up 2 ways. You can wire it up to literally be stereo, where you can plug in a Y cable and have your bass sound going to that amp over there, and then your other amp over there. So you stereo of 2, wired up 2 ways. One pickup going that way, one pickup going that way. Or more commonly these days, the battery ground goes to one of these. So what you're going to do to test this, we're going to use a multimeter to show you how when you plug in the cable, you engage the ground to the battery, and that is what causes the battery to power the preamp, but also the battery's constantly draining. That's why you always need to unplug from this style of jack when you have active electronics. Okay, we're down on the 20K setting on the multimeter here. If you notice, when I touch this together, it goes all the way to 0. That's full connection. All right, come on, get all the way to 0. See, just like that. That means we've got a nice solid connection. So as I was talking before, we have the long tab here is supposed to connect to the outside shell of the jack. So I'm going to take, you may have probes on yours, I've put alligator clips on mine so I can do this, And when I touch the outside, see, it's connected. So we know that this tab is ground. Now we've got these other two tabs. I'm going to connect to the longer one of the two. Make sure that I'm not touching the other two, otherwise this test isn't going to give an accurate result. But notice, doesn't do anything. We're still at that open 1 setting. Going to connect to the really small one over here. And again, make sure you're not touching anything. There's still no connection. Take a cable, plug it in, and we already know that this outside one is going to be ground. Nearly all the time, the longer of the other two tabs is going to be the ground for the battery. I'm going to connect to that. Remember, we had no reading here before, and now it's grounding out. We can double check this real short one over here. This should have no reading. As you see, no reading. So I'll go back to this longer tab. Full reading, unplug, no reading, plug it back in. Full reading. So that's how you know, or you're able to test to figure out which of these is supposed to go to the battery ground. On this one, it's the longer of these two that have the little eyelet through the middle of them. And our chassis ground or main ground, whatever you want to call it, is that long tab that we cut off before. That one is always for sure going to be the external chassis ground. So now we're going to go and solder this back in. Our hot wire goes there. The negative or ground for the battery box goes here, and then your regular other ground goes here. So when we install this back into the instrument, with the barrel jack, if you have one of these rubber washers, make sure you put that on so that it is on the outside of the instrument. This will then be put in through the hole inside of the instrument. When it's inside, you want to put on a normal washer, regular flat washer, a lock washer or tooth washer. There's a couple different names for them. And then after that, you will have a standard nut. It's pretty thin. It should come with the jack. These jacks sometimes are not sold with the lock washer or the rubber piece. You might be able to find them at your local hardware store. Ideally, you put this rubber on. It helps prevent any damage on the finish. If you don't have one, it's not a deal breaker, but you should at least look for one. If you have a nice instrument, you don't want to damage the finish just because you got lazy and didn't put one of these on. So that's the assembly. So once we have it in the base, you'll need a real thin wrench like this to tighten it down. You might be able to find something at like a bike shop or whatever if you don't have one. Test out if you've got a bigger wrench to fit in there, but these something thin like this is what works best. Jack goes in. Washer. Lock washer. Nut. And sometimes it's easier to hold the nut in place and turn the jack on the outside. I'm actually getting the nut to turn. And ideally, turn this so that you have access to the terminals on the jack so that you can solder. But if you're a little leery of that, if you're doing this yourself, leave it loose for now, get the connections made, and then kind of turn it into place so everything's out of the way, and then tighten the nut down. We've got our wire that goes to the battery box. It doesn't matter what order we do this, but I'm soldering this one up now. And also, anytime you have a battery in your electronics and you're doing some soldering, take the battery out. It is may not be crucial anymore, but there was a time when if you still had your battery connected when you were doing soldering, you could cause a surge and blow out your preamp or your pickups if the pickups were active. So just for good measure, take the battery out because you don't want to have anything like that happen. Also, if you haven't noticed, have a yellow leather skirting covering the instrument. Always protect the instrument. You don't want to accidentally drop your soldering iron onto the finish or touch the sides or anything. You got to be careful about this stuff. So I'll just finish these off and we'll be ready to go. It won't tighten down like real tight. You just get it nice and snug. Make sure you're not crushing anything, wires out of the way. And that's really all there is to it. I'll add a little zip tie to kind of keep the wires bundled together just for neatness sake. And there we go. Finished the job. All right, it's all working. So it's a very simple repair. Easy to do if you're a do-it-yourselfer. Make sure you've got the correct part. Jacks really don't cost that much, so make sure you get a quality one. There's no point in going through this work and putting in like a super cheap part. You know, a jack that costs $5 versus a jack that costs $2. Yet, if this is your first time doing this and you're putting in like an hour of your time, just spend a couple more dollars and get the better part. Barrel jacks do cost quite a bit more. Everything's all internal on them. There's no repairing a barrel jack, so if you notice your cable wiggles around just a little bit and the signal cuts in and out, you just got to replace it. The standard quarter-inch output jack that has that little arm on it, sometimes you can bend that over so your cable plugs in a little stiffer. That's pretty easy. Sometimes you can kind of, with the contact cleaner, you can clean them up a little bit if they're wiggling around, they're grounding out a little bit. So that's the job. If you don't already have a soldering iron to do this, or you're not sure of your skills or whatever, it's not a hard job. It's not expensive at all. You can maybe call around local shops in your area, ask price on it, and see what they're charging for that. I operate by appointment. That way, if somebody has an issue like an output jack, you call ahead. I'm ready for you when you get in here. I'll just do it while you wait. 10 to 15 minutes and we're done. But I need to know ahead of time so I can schedule and set other jobs aside, so on and so on. Other shops may do the same thing, but you just have to call and ask. So if you have any further questions on this or any comments, whatever, you can leave in the comments section below or contact me directly. In the About section, you'll find my contact information, and we'll see you next time.